This video is for Max-Flo INLINE maintenance. Looks like this. This is an infrequent activity, but again, something you have to do. Here's a video for it. With the Max-Flo INLINE system, such as this, you have to remove the tank from the reg in order to service it. So, naturally, it has to be completely empty of air. I can turn the smart valve on, no air comes out, just 0 psi in the tank. That means you're ready to go. So, unscrew the two. Unthread the tank. Set the tank aside. The regulator is built into two sections which are going to come apart. The first step is to take apart the end cap, which just unscrews from the rest of the reg. The internals of the end cap consist of this filter element, which goes in first, plastic bumper goes in after that, the spring, and the spring guide. Spring guide goes on top. That's okay. You don't have to worry about any of that. Down inside here is the piston, but as you can see it's kind of stuck in there, so I'm not going to take it out yet. Turn the reg around. Look at the back. This is where the tank is. There are the 4 screws holding the body to the manifold. All these screws have to be removed in order to get the two apart. It'll take a little bit of time, but once they're out, the two will separate. Last screw comes out. Now, this piece with the threads where the end cap goes will come off from this piece. If they don't immediately spring off from one another, it means you're going to have to pull the two apart. I'm going to stick the end cap back on so I can get some leverage. And then I'm just going to yank them off like that. Okay. Now, when the two slide apart, this is the regulator, this is the manifold. There should be a brass piece on the end of that. It stayed inside the manifold. So there it is. When it comes apart, it should look like this. Continue disassembling the reg means you pull out the brass poppet guide, tip it upside down, and out will come the poppet and the poppet spring. The piston, located in the front, can now be pushed out gently by inserting something small into the back and pushing it a little bit. There it is, piston. I'm going to clean off all of these things, especially the O-rings. On the piston and on the poppet, you need to clean off the large back piece, flip it around, and clean off this flared section which has a small O-ring embedded in it. This is actually a 2-piece assembly, and the O-ring is sandwiched in between. But this O-ring right here is what controls the regulator working or not, so it's very important that you clean that. Take a Q-tip, insert it down into this reg, clean off all the surfaces in there. This is where the poppet seals against it, so you need to make sure that's nice and clean. I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this now that it's cleaned off. This means you take a small amount of grease, put it on the back of the poppet, slide the spring over it, then drop it back down into the reg body. Brass poppet guide goes in after it, down into position. Now re-grease this size 18 O-ring on the outside of it, and put a little bit of grease around the reg, around the shaft right here. Insert the reg into the manifold like this, and they'll click down into position reinstall the screws back onto it. One of the screws is installed now, so I can finish putting this back together. Regrease the piston O-ring, which is a size 12 in case you have to replace it. Make sure there's a lot of grease on there. Insert it into the reg body, small O-ring end facing in. Push it down a couple times, distribute it. Take the end cap assembled, pop it onto there, and tighten that down a little bit. Now I'm going to reinstall all 4 of these screws. And now the reg is all back together. The only other part that goes on the reg is this smart valve right here. If your tank is leaking air out while the valve is in the off position, then you'll have to remove this small screw using a 1/20th inch Allen wrench, also known as a .05 inch. Remove the screw fully, and eventually it'll come out, and then you can pull the valve out and replace the 490 O-ring in there. That's in a different video, so I'm not going to go into that. But that's how it's done, and that's a fairly common little issue with these Max-Flo inline regs, so it's probably something you'll have to experience once or twice, unfortunately. But assuming you don't have to do that, you can just go ahead and reinstall the tank. All the tank pressure is held on by this O-ring right here, which is a size 907 diameter 90. There's no Loctite on the tank. Don't Loctite it. It'll just make it harder to take apart in the future. So just tighten it up, and there it is, all done.